is that I'm called for all the English-speaking panels. I'm warmly welcoming again, once again, it's the third time in a row, Όμηρε, that you're on the stage of the CEO Initiative Forum here in Athens, flying in from London the day before, so you're freshly arrived. And today, I think you have something, let's say that it's very much fortune-like, which is that you have a lot of key data honed to perfection, analyzed to excellence by your team. Όμηρος Σαρίκας, for those who have not met the man so far, is the CEO, the managing director and founder of Brookstreet Equity out of London, as you heard. And he has been focusing on matters of AI, ESG for years, including running investments very much in Greece over the past 5 years. Όμηρε, your team and yourself led what has been perhaps the most comprehensive research on private equity and VC funds in Greece from a market angle. And I think that this has tremendous value to be presented at the stage of the CEO initiative. So with that cue, I invite the Fortune team to load the presentation, and the floor is all yours until we can have a discussion at the end of the data.
Sure. Thank you.
A little bit more on how we can approach the growth equation of innovation in Greece.
Thank you, Pablo. Greetings, everybody. Basically, as Pablo said, we came from London to do a little presentation to you about a study that we've done that lasted a few months. And having invested in Greece since 2013 in various asset classes, venture capital, private equity, growth capital, and everything in between, we decided to really take a hard look at what's the state of the market, to understand where is the gap, and more importantly, to reflect where do we go from here. The study that we've done is internal, and it's over 100 pages. So obviously, we wanted to share a very succinct set of findings with the senior audience of the Fortune CEO Initiative. So we have only a handful of 10 slides for you, and a page of reflections where we can have our discussion, I guess.
Please.
So if we start with the ecosystem, we have to differentiate between venture capital, private equity, and credit. The industry uses the term wrong, by the way. Private equity, they call everything, and it's not correct. There are distinct asset classes, and fund is called everything, and again, it's not correct. We are fund managers, but we have dedicated pools of capitals, which are called funds. But if we take the terminology that most newspapers seem to recall, let's go to venture capital. In venture capital in Greece, we observe 31 players at the moment. And they handle, give or take, 1.2 billion of AUM, assets under management. They have done so far over 550 investments. The interesting part here is the difference between the mean fund size and the median. The most repeated fund size is 30 million. And that's basically because of the matching applications that we have in Greece, where we have the support of the government in order to create funds with matched funding. And we're going to speak about that in a minute. Contrary, on the other side of the scale, private equity, what we call buyouts, the larger cap consolidations, SMEs that are buckled and supported to scale, we have 5 players. And those 5 players are not pure play private equity. They do distress sometimes. They do a little bit of everything. But they are the larger funds of Greece, mostly by bankers, as opposed to venture capital, that mostly are programmers, operators, turned venture capitalists.
And Όμηρε, to bridge that, we usually refer to them as scale-up players here in the Greek,
the scale-up is
in the Greek jargon, but I guess it's wrong because also at VC they want to scale up.
Scale-up is VC.
Yeah.
What we call this is build-up, because you usually buy firms. This is majority stakes. You buy firms, you consolidate, you build them up, and you roll them out.
Right.
So you do roll-ups, or you create a chain. You buy 10 pharmacies, you create Boots. Right? So this is the key market here. And we can see again the difference. But the difference between mean and median is much smaller, right? The gap that we have. Because it's a concentrated pool of capital. The other part of the ecosystem, as we know, Greece is overbanked, actually. And the whole game here started because of the lack of funding from the banks when we had the crisis. So we have 3 players, and there is a huge difference between the mean and the median. They have done approximately 200 deals, but a lot of this is recycling. The way credit fund works is I give you money, you give it back to me, I give it back to the other guy, right? So they're not really deals, they are transactions, to be specific. So if you pull this together, you got your market. So what is the market? 39 players, as we stand. Yours included, 40 from abroad. 2.4 billion, 800 transactions. That's where we stand as a market right now, okay? As of today, the latest set of numbers. What was the catalyst of change? When I first came to Greece, I remember, and I was at the big conference, the first European Venture Capital Conference that was consolidated with Europe at the time. We were speaking about 4 funds, the Jeremy funds. For those that know, there was a European initiative, the Jeremy initiative, the Taneo initiative at the time. Then we had Jeremy 2, then we had the EIF, which came with the equity fund, and now we have the rebirth of Taneo as HDBI. And much of the credit of Antigone and Harris here, they have done an amazing job. They really created the market. There has never been such activity as the activity that HDBI has done. And to their credit, I've met them in various conferences around the world, the key ones that the fund managers meet, the global fund managers meet, and they were there, learning, sharing, networking. It was amazing. So they have done 6 recent calls across different classes where they invite funds to be created. And that created, over the last few months, 18 FTFs, what we call first-time fund managers. When somebody has a Fund 1, is an FTF. Fund 2 is an emerging manager. Now, before somebody points out where is Remedium here in restructuring, that was a fund not from the lateral calls. And in the presentation, we have the 6 recent calls of HDBI, which are public information. You go to their website, you can see those classifications are not mine to be made. There is an interesting part here, which I highlighted, which is scale-ups. 2 funds that we supported, which are not Greek. One is from England, one is from France. And this is the gap, the scale-up gap. We don't have scale-up funds. I know Mr. Verem is a big buyer trying to raise a big scale-up gap with a specific initiative. I know it's been talked about to all the right circles. But the huge issue of Europe, not just for 1 or 2 funds, is the scale-up funding. And I will come to that in a minute. If we take the attention of all the activity, everything is on the edge in the early onset entrepreneurship. We want to start up entrepreneurship. This is what we created. That was our model, right? I happen to judge on the Elevate Greece. I see reports every week about guys who want to fund entrepreneurship. But when all of this funded, the exits that we have, which are minuscule, and it's not just us, the whole world went down for the last 4 years. We had the credit crisis, we had the COVID, we have interest rates, God bless them, going down now. And then at the end, we have 3 wars, right? The exits that we see, which are small, it's actually alarming that none of them are going to European hands. So let's get this right. We are funding our startups with European money from our taxpayers, where we give to create entrepreneurship and innovations, and then we hand it over to the Americans or the Israelis at a very cheap price. And that, for me, is very alarming. So the social impact element of all of that is that we don't see as much of that nexus really making an impact in Greece yet. You will see actually the numbers deteriorated over the last 3 years. However, there is a promising future. If we compare the activity of my country that I came from, actually my country is here, the country I reside for the last 30 years, with Greece, Greece rocks. It's the only country right now that actually increases activity. The percentage of GDP per capita, it's still small, European levels, those are the American. And the actual size is minuscule compared to the big guys. But the activity is increasing. Everybody else is kind of putting the brake a little bit, right? Because of the crisis of the last 4 years. For those that do not know, venture capital, private equity had the worst 3-4 years in their history of their inception. Silicon Valley Bank was a bigger event in this industry than it was Lehman Brothers in the banking industry. It completely changed the game. So with that view, this is not the full report. The report goes down to every fund, every transaction, every analysis. But the key takeaways are here. We have a large market motivated by the matched funding element that HBDI does, the matched private capital with the capital of Greece, and actually they act these days as gatekeepers to Mubadala or EIF, etc. And we do have a growing market, which its whole premise is not just entrepreneurship, but also social impact and enforcing a modern Greece.
Όμηρε, quick points when we will go now to recommendation phase, and I think you have prepared something on that, because the obvious question here is we have invested a lot, we've tried to start something. The data suggests that we've made progress, clearly, but when you compare to the European, the UK example, the numbers are incomparable at the moment. And at the same time, when I heard, for example, that 1 in 2 funds is by a new founder, I imagine that the risk of failure there is much higher. The lessons learned are being learned on the first fund and so forth. And the second aspect is that when you showed the exits, most of the exits came from the bigger funds.
Actually, the non-Greek funds.
And
they were exits of
the bigger and the non-Greek. So what do we do? How do we go forward from here? What has been a great report is also in part alarming. What's the next step to drive this nascent ecosystem of funding now into success? Because the valuation of our startups is higher, the Greek founders abroad are doing well, and the extroversion bridge is there, but at the same time, the ecosystem seems to have access to money which is not necessarily successful, smart, or ready to guide it to a true scale-up in a sustainable fashion. So how do we go about it?
Right. Well, my reflections, and I took a lot of time about this slide, probably more about the whole presentation and the report. I spent quite a lot of time reflecting. What is the next step? And there are some key points that I see. On the startup, when we start a company, we need to really invest in our universities. Innovation, right? And the number one thing is commercialize that innovation, IP to IPO, patent it, partner with people, with business, and commercialize it. And really build on the Made in Greece brand and the Research in Greece brand. I don't know how many of you know that Metsovio here has done, Patra and other institutions, has done fantastic work. But I'm sure that when we think of a PhD doing AI, we're thinking of the guys at Stanford or MIT. And it's a real pity because they really are doing momental waves in their industry, the Democritus Institute and the rest, and we see quite a lot of their work. The second part, I think, is when you create a business, the biggest gap for Greece and the southern Europe, really, the weakest pillar of Europe, has been education. And that's managerial education. I do not know a lot of founders, even oligarchs, who if you tell them return on capital employed, they can give you an answer. I do not know a lot of people who run their businesses by KPIs, by key performance indicators. It's all run like a guy who's driving a Vespa versus the airline pilot who actually rides at night with instruments. And you need that data. We need to really educate our audience. Once you now create that wave of new entrepreneurs or people who want to embark on the entrepreneurial journey, the modern entrepreneurial journey, you go into scale-ups. So once you go into scale-ups, we really have a gap. We have a lot of startups. Where do they go from here? And I will tell you what's the biggest issue with them, that they cannot actually be here the way things are. They have to go abroad, as it is. Because most of the scale-up funds are motivated by tax breaks. And we'll come to that in a minute. But on the scale-up, I think the number one issue I have observed is governance. It has to be an institutional firm. We rely too much on founders, on management teams, who are talented. But what happens if a guy is sick? What happens if we want to scale? We cannot replicate yet and clone Pavlos. It needs to be fortune. Everybody's bigger than the firm in Greece. It should be the other way around. The firm is bigger than the founder. And that's something we have not taken away.
This reminds me of institutions in politics as a parallel. Okay, so...
The last part is the build-up, private equity, right? And here the message is, how do you do private equity? Because you don't have so much growth in those classes, in those mature firms, right? You buy cash flows and you leverage them. Leverage means debt. The banks need to support private equity. Unless we have leverage from our banks for private equity, there will not be private equity. End of story.
And then if we scale up and we build up, how do we exit?
Well, the exit is a bit more tricky. There are a few issues there. To exit successfully, you need to be able to commercialize the idea that you have and go beyond any grants, understand the product market fit, and find the right firm to exit. You have to build for the exit from the scratch. The issue that we see is that people build firms, but without necessarily knowing why or where they're going to exit. You need to go backwards. From the moment that you set up a firm and you scale it, you need to have a horizon where I'm going to exit and how I'm going to exit and turn that back. And the last point, I think, is to do that, you need to create momentum. So to create momentum, you need big pockets of money. The country I work, 2.4 billion, it's the average fund, large fund. It's nothing to cry home about. So the whole country is worth one fund in the UK. The capacity of the country is much more. So we only scratch the surface. There are 3,000 funds just in England. Trillions are being invested. The reason is that their government, many years ago, decided if they are blue, green, or yellow, or purple, they decided to really give tax breaks to the investors and funds. So if I am investing in a fund or in a startup, as a UK taxpayer, I get 30% of my money back the first day. You get 100K, I get 30K off for my tax.
Όμηρε, may I suggest the following? Number one, you have the helicopter view. You proved it to the audience. So we're looking forward to seeing your next steps as a fund manager. We hope to see Greece in it in a positive way. And let's say with the benefit of hindsight, with everything you've done, and looking forward, and with the benefit of being in the UK, guide us to a new era of innovation with these elements there. The second one is if you can share your presentation with the CEO Initiative audience for further study. And with that, I will need to thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll take that with our compliance team, but other than that, we'll be delighted. I think that really the message is that we scratch the surface. We need to create some landmark events, create a professional body that will promote the industry, and actually create here a mecca for innovative studies. And one thing that most people don't appreciate, I've done over 200 deals for the past few years in all the countries in the world. Do you know that Greece are one of the few countries that speak affluent English? It's actually surprising to me. Go to Europe, most countries, incompetent to actually say a word in English when it comes to professional setting. We have an edge in our education, and we need to utilize that.
Let's use our advantages. Thank you so much, Όμηρε. Tasos Zachos, the floor is yours. Όμηρε, thank you so much.
Thank you.